God is right here in my heart. God is right here in my heart. I'm raising the veil.
And now, let's give a warm welcome to Reverend Karim Beldjilali.
Thank you. It's so lovely to be here, to be with you again. And thank you for the warm welcome and the prayer. What a moment this is. What a moment in history, in our time as a country, and in our time together. And in the pleasure of speaking to you today, I know there's also heartbreak. There's been some recent news that I know has broken many of our hearts. The violence in Florida, the continuation of gun violence, period. And yet at the same time, that in balance with knowing that we are here as the presence of love today. And I want to speak to that today. And at the same time, acknowledging too that this is Black History Month. A time where we get to consciously take note of our history as a nation, one that is mired, yes, in violence, and yet great hope and perseverance, and change and progress. And so, looking at that through the lens of love, through the lens of a bit of heartbreak, through the call of action of history, of folks like Martin Luther King Jr., but also folks like Bayard Rustin and lesser-known names, to look at the fact that love is continually calling us to change, to ever expand, to push beyond the bounds of what is right here, right now, right in front of us, and calling us to express that love through our actions, through our words, through our being together. And that's really what my talk is about today, the faces of love. Not just each other's faces, and it's lovely to see that personified, but to see how it shows up as the qualities in our lives, that transformation, that voice in our head that is saying there's more to this, there's more to us, there's more purpose that we can live in our lives. And so today's talk really is about how love is a transformative force and how we can recognize it and how we can be engaged with it in all of its facets. I was taken aback as I was preparing for this and also just having to pivot a bit with the recent events and go back to the basics, really. And I was reminded when I was a little boy about a reading in the Quran that I remember my grandfather sharing with me. And it was about love. It said, "In whose hand your soul is, you will not enter paradise unless you believe, and you will not believe unless you love each other." And this paradise not necessarily means anything after this life, although one can be literal about it. It could be the paradise that we build right here amongst each other, amongst this community, amongst one another, one-on-one. and to just be really attuned to how it is the gateway by which all things are indeed possible, that all is possible through love. So, to take a step back, I want to just discuss the faces of love that we are most familiar with and get into the heart of what I want to talk about. We're very comfortable in this society, and interestingly, we only have few words to really express the word love. I'm sorry you're going to keep hearing that word from me over and over and over. It is interesting in, say, Spanish, there's 7 words for love itself, and a lot of the Romance languages, they really illuminate it. And in our case, I want to just talk about it in terms of its multidimensionality. We know love in our friendships, right? We know that a deep, abiding connection that occurs between folks. We know playful love, the kind of love that is between children, where they play with each other with such innocence, or flirtatious love, where young lovers talk to each other and tease each other. And we know of self-love, and we talk about that a lot in terms of self-improvement here, in these walls and in probably our own spiritual journey and work. And we know that all of these have a balance and can be out of balance, right? Too much self-love can lead to narcissism and a complete disconnection from anyone outside of ourselves. It also leads to othering, where it is just about us and everything outside of us is something else, something distant, something separate. We've seen also in the Me Too movement the quality of love that is in the erotic, going beyond the pale of what is appropriate, that there's a power dynamic, that there is a disconnection from this other person that you are with, this communion that we are in together at all times. And the loves that I really want to spend time talking about are, we know one of them as agape, the one that is about building through our own self-love, our greater capacity to express, to hold, to receive, to communicate love amongst each other and hold the great community of life, of the earth, Mother Nature, all within our heart, all with our love. And yet the question remains, and it is for us to discover and uncover together through our journey of life. How do we connect to that capacity? How do we keep expanding and pushing that greater capacity? I start first with a conversation that John Steinbeck had with his son. His son came up to him and said, "Dad, I'm getting married." He was very young, 22 years old. And John Steinbeck was taken aback, not just by surprise, but what words of wisdom he could offer his son at this transition. And he just said to him, "Love is an outpouring of everything good in you. It's a recognition of another person as unique and valuable, that it can release in you strength, courage, and goodness, and wisdom that you didn't even know you had." And that, to me, is the last piece of love that the Greeks originally, when they enumerated all the different types, I want to speak to you about today. Practical love. They called it pragma. It is the root of the word pragmatism. When we hear that word nowadays, it is really thought of as, gee, it's practical. He's pragmatic. He's a practical person, down to earth. But interestingly, isn't it interesting to find that it's rooted in love, in this connection of community, of being together, of being one, of reunification? And so the question is, what is that pragmatic love really look like? The Greeks said it was a long-standing love, the kind of love you see between a couple that has been together decades. One of devotion, one where we compromise to help the relationship move along. We are giving towards something greater than ourselves, and we are working towards continual acceptance. And that just struck me really this week, where we're having conversations perhaps past each other, or maybe not conversing at all, specifically about whether it's guns or violence, or scapegoating perhaps one person when there are systems in place that perpetuate violence and perpetuate inequity. And so for us, the question is, what would love do? When we are lost, or when we are concerned or confused about what is going on in the world, our inspiration could be just in that question itself. What would love have us do? May I compromise without being compromised myself? I would say yes. If we act out of a place of love, when we compromise with someone and we have the greater picture of what love has in hold for us together, we don't compromise ourselves. We are acting out of a place of love. When we devote ourselves to something greater than ourselves, that devotion is what expands us beyond just ourselves. And at the same time, it is the kind of love that allows us to forgive. And of all the things in our history and as a people too, there's so much that we are working on towards forgiving. The history of slavery in this country, the history of injustice, not just towards a particular race, but also towards a particular gender as well. We're seeing the Me Too movement point out the gender inequity in the world. And while this may make us uncomfortable, this pragmatism, puts it right in front of us and says, we must face and accept this. We are here for the long haul, are we not? Are we not here to be devoted to each other? I'm taken aback a bit, and specifically around forgiveness. A Nelson Mandela poem, well, not his poem, but a poem that he used on Robben Island to give himself sustenance, to give himself support. And it's a Victorian poem. It's called Invictus, and I'm just going to name some of it. It begins with, out of the night that covers me, black as the pit from pole to pole, I thank whatever gods may be for my unconquerable soul. For many of us, God is love. Love is God. They are interchangeable words. And the unconquerability of our soul is, in my view, how love is just unending, unceasing. It is always there with us at our back. Like the poem in the opening prayer, it is that brook that sustains life. It is in everything and imbues everything. And like that brook, it can carve through a valley, through the hardest of stone. It can smooth the roughest of edges of those stones. It can sustain all the life that is around it. And it flows into a sea, into a community, and gives and gives and gives. I want to focus on the ending of that poem, which is what really Mandela was speaking to. He said, the poem goes on, no matter how straight the gate, nor how charged with punishments the scroll, I am the master of my fate. I am the captain of my soul. No matter how straight the gate. In love's working, and in our working, in our daily being together, sometimes it does feel that there is a narrowness to it all, doesn't it? An unspaciousness, perhaps a hopelessness. Yet even in the utter, utter darkness of it all, no matter how straight the gate, how little we may see, the smallest flicker of light can light the darkest of rooms. And even our own judgments, the charged with punishments to scroll, right? All the things we've written down or perhaps judged amongst ourselves or each other, no matter how long that list is, that does not disavow us from the fact that we are the captain, the masters of our soul, the captains of our fates as well, to move forward, to keep pushing forward. I think this is the greatest gift of love. We understand it mostly as romantic, but it is a persevering force. It is a force for change. It is a force for transformation. It is always asking us for more and to expand. We know the law of the universe is continual expansion, don't we? That scientists tell us the universe is expanding. What I find most interesting is that it's accelerating in its expansion. It is moving faster and faster as it's expanding. And we as human beings, and I find myself saying this too, it's like, goodness, so much is changing. And it feels like it's changing faster and faster and faster. And life is a reflection of the law. I know you spoke about that much last month. And the law is that we are also that change. That love is moving through us and pushing us faster and faster. And that when we connect and work out of a place of love, that is very possible. Bayard Rustin, a civil rights leader, and really the person that spearheaded the conversation in the March on Washington for Martin Luther King Jr.'s I Have a Dream speech, said every community deserves and needs some angelic troublemakers. And that's the balancing act, is it not? To act out of a place of love, yet be that force of change and progress. To be that voice that just speaks up, that just expresses love in all of its forms, whether it's justice, whether it's just pure kindness. Sometimes it's just pure presence or giving or generosity. We've been taught that the opposite of love is hate. And many of us have heard, no, that's not true. It's really that it's fear. And I would add a little more to that. That love, the opposite of it, is incuriosity. It is being shut down, closed off. That brook would not run, right, if it were dammed up. But we know nonetheless that the water will find a way around, won't it? That it will seep through. That even in the frozen times that like we're experiencing right now, that it is expanding too, and that it will find a way. So for the changes all in our lives, for the changes in our society, everything that we keep seeing, and perhaps sometimes, I don't want to say withholding, but challenging us, right? It's exhausting. We can certainly admit that. It's confusing sometimes. Nonetheless, to come back to our heart-centered place and reconnect to our heart, to our love, and see it for what it is, that it is the force in action, that everyone is yearning and speaking the same conversation. Sometimes we're clumsy, sometimes we don't have the right words, and let love do its work even there and allow for compassion, patience, devotion, and know we are in this for the long haul. So, what would love have me do? Is it about self-interest, or is it about self-expansion? Like Steinbeck, is it an outpouring from us? How do we show up in the world is the question. Is it like water where it's a mighty river and it carves through those rocks like we said? Or does it want to really just be with us and sustain us? And we know still that there is movement nonetheless. For me, that's where love is such a great miracle. It is an oxymoron. It binds us together, yet it frees us. And it frees us in our own capacity, yet frees us together as a community to be more and more amongst each other. And it's supremely practical. And we forget that. We sometimes may conceptualize it too much. And at the same time, it's a great mystery. Isn't it amazing that this force just works all around us? I'm just taken aback by it. It's so humbling to see this ineffable, divine, beautiful thing just keep working through us and around us. And that is its greatest miracle, is that we just have to be here now. And it will do its thing. We may resist like hell, but it's still here now. We may fight it or go with it. And we know it's either at our back or it's at our back. That there is no separation indeed. I could quote half of the song that you sang earlier this morning because I was like, ooh, they got this already. They got this already. And I'm just here as another member of this community just to be a reminder that we have this great transformative force within us, around us, and as us. And so I leave you just with the poem, really. Should love or another person give you a cloud, love shall give you rain. Should one person give you a lantern, love shall give you the moon. Should love give you a branch, I will give you the trees. And if another gives you a ship, I will give you the journey. And I leave you with that love is just this gorgeous journey. That in its heartbreak and in its sometimes evisceration of what we hold on so dearly to, that we feel perhaps it's laid waste to everything we understand or are or held ourselves to be, that love in and of itself is this gentle, tender force that is just so generous that it breaks us because it's giving more than we can handle. And how beautiful is that in hindsight? And how terrorizing that may be in process? And acknowledging that we are resisting sometimes. But just keep asking yourself, what would love have me do? What would love have me do? And so enjoy the journey. I'm so proud to be in the journey with you and happy and thrilled, and my heart is just singing with you throughout this journey. Please just keep that as a reminder. We are in this together, and what would love have me do? Thank you.